Hey everyone, it's Bill here again, and today I've got a tutorial for those of you who are interested in cocktail piano. This kind of really free and easy jazzy style that's actually quite handy to have up your sleeve, especially if you want to play at weddings or parties or whatever, but which is also kind of really fun and satisfying to play at home just for yourself. So what I'm going to do today is work through a piece in cocktail style, but keep things fairly easy and simple to give those of you who are just trying to get into the style a relatively straightforward approach to it. Now I'm going to be working on the basis that you know some basics, like which note is where on the piano keyboard, and maybe a few scales, and also that you know some stuff about chords, like the basic chord shapes, and also some simple extended chords like major sevenths and minor sevenths. If you don't yet know that stuff, then watch this tutorial anyway, but make sure you subscribe to my channel and check out some of my playlists and tutorials on chords to kind of help you develop that underlying knowledge that will give you a really great place to start from with your cocktail piano learning. Okay, let's get going. The song I'm going to be working on today is Blue Moon by Richard Rodgers and Lorenz Hart. Now I've used Blue Moon as an example lots of times before, and that's because it's quite simple, but it's also a really well constructed little song. We can use it to make lots of interesting little points. And it's all based around a simple 4-chord chord progression. E flat, C minor, F minor, and B flat, repeated over and over again. Those 4 chords are the heart of the song, yeah? E flat, C minor, F minor, B flat. There's a middle section with different chords, but we'll look at that towards the end of the tutorial. For now, I just want to focus on this little progression. It's actually a really useful progression to learn because it's very common. Lots and lots of songs use it. So for example, Heart and Soul. Okay, exactly the same chords. It's sometimes called the 50s progression because although Blue Moon's from the 1930s and Heart and Soul from about the same time, but lots and lots of doo-wop songs in the 1950s also used it. Yeah, so if you learn that progression, you can't, it's not just Blue Moon that you can improvise on, but it's lots and lots of other songs as well. I'll start off by just playing through a couple of verses of Blue Moon so we can kind of get it in our heads. What I'm going to do is play the chord progression in my left hand, but I'll play the chords in slightly extended form for a bit of a richer, a bit of a cooler sound. E flat major 7, C minor 7, F minor 7, and B flat 7. And I'll put the melody in the right hand. The melody is actually really simple. It starts on B flat. Either work it out for yourself by ear or just copy what I'm doing, yeah? It's quite simple and I'll play it quite slowly. Here we go. So far, so good. We've got the beginnings of our cocktail sound, especially with that D, the major 7th on the E flat chord there. Okay, that's one of the very, very distinctive sounds of cocktail piano. But we also have a couple of things that we could improve. For a start, that single note melody in the right maybe just sounds a bit kind of weedy. We maybe need to thicken that up a bit. Conversely, we maybe need to thin out the left a little bit, yeah, because once you get quite chunky chords below middle C on the piano, they can start to sound a little bit muddy and a bit unclear. That's because they're generating lots of overtones, lots of resonances up the piano keyboard, and the effect becomes worse the further below middle C you go. Around here it's not too bad, but it's good practice to kind of thin things out, yeah? Really good chord voicings on the piano tend to have wider spacings, wider intervals between the notes down here, and tighter intervals, closer spacings as we go further up the piano keyboard. So something that we could do is kind of reverse what we were doing there. We could play thicker chords in the right underneath the melody and thin out the left a little bit. Let me show you the kind of thing I mean. see what I was doing there? I've gone from playing whole chords in the left to just more or less single notes, the root of each chord usually, E flat, C, F and B flat, and in the right I was adding in the harmony by kind of having two voices, two separate musical lines. Okay, one playing the melody on top fairly freely and the other just filling in the chords a little bit underneath it. I was sticking it all together, making it sure it didn't kind of wind up sounding all disjointed by using the sustain pedal, the right hand pedal on the piano. I was also just beginning to play around with those chords a little bit. Now, if you've watched any of my other tutorials on cocktail piano or my stuff on jazz piano, you'll know that in common with jazz, because cocktail is really just a spin-off from jazz, you know, one of the things we do to create the distinctive sound is to extend chords, to, you know, to play those sevenths and ninths and so on rather than the basic chord. But we also substitute chords. We replace one chord with another that sounds different but has the same function, it does the same job. So one thing that I was doing there, when it came to the B flat 7 chord, the number 5 chord, instead of playing that chord very frequently, I was playing an F minor 7 chord, okay, a number 2 chord, the same as in the previous bar before the B flat, but with a B flat in the bass, okay, so that minor 7, that minor 7 chord based on the second degree of the scale, F minor 7 in E flat major with a B flat in the bass, the 5th note of the scale in the bass, is a pretty common substitution for the 5 chord in major keys. Okay, so instead of B flat to E flat, we have F minor 7 over B flat to E flat. Okay, so now we've got something that's beginning to sound quite cocktaily and quite cool. Just remember, you don't need to obsess too much about timing and tempo. One of the great things about cocktail piano for learners is that you can take songs in a very leisurely way. That's an important part of the style, but it also kind of gives you a lot of latitude, a lot of freedom to play around. If you do decide you want to add some more movement, one thing you can do is add a strides pattern in the bass. Let me demonstrate what I mean, and I will just go out of shot a little bit here, but I'll tell you what the notes are in a second. Okay, did you see what I was doing there? I talked about strides quite a lot in the past, but very briefly, what we do is play a single note down in this part of the keyboard, a couple of octaves below middle C, on beats 1 and 3, and a chord somewhere up here, closer to middle C, on beats 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The note that's out of shot there is B flat, yeah? 1, 2, 3, 4. Obviously it only works in 4/4 or 2/4 or 2/2 time. It doesn't quite work the same in if you're in waltz time, but in 4/4 time it works very neatly. Yeah. Now typically what we do is play the root of the chord, the note the chord is named after, on beat 1. Okay, then a shape up here on beat 2. Then on beat 3 we play the 5th note of the chord. Okay, so that's B flat for an E flat chord, and then the chord. And when we play the chord up here, we can either play the same chord both times, or we can vary it a little bit. You know, it's kind of it kind of gives you a little bit of movement, a little bit of interest in the bass. But again, it's quite flexible. It's quite straightforward. In a second, I'm going to look at how you can add little runs and flourishes to a cocktail piece. But before I do, I just want to mention my ebook, An Introduction to Cocktail Piano, which has a lowdown on all the essential skills you need for cocktail piano, with a particular focus on the kind of harmonies that you need to kind of work up to develop an authentic cocktail sound. If you need help with the underlying theory, like how chords work and how to get started with improvisation, you might also like my other book, How to Really Play the Piano, which covers all of that stuff in detail and is available as both print and digital editions. Click the links in the description field right underneath this video, or in the little letter I in the top right hand corner of this video frame, to find out more about both books. While you're clicking around on stuff, you might also try the red button marked subscribe in the bottom right hand corner down there. That'll subscribe you to my channel, where I think I've now got getting on for a couple of hundred piano tutorials on subject from jazz to rock, and even a series for complete piano beginners if you're just starting out. Let's get back to Blue Moon. What I'm going to do for the next few minutes is just put the melody to one side and think about ways we can play around with the chords, okay? Because if you're playing cocktail piano professionally, you don't want to just kind of play the melody of your song and then move on to the next song, because you run out of songs too quickly. Yeah, you like to play the melody, then fool around a bit, and then play the melody, and use up 6 or 7 minutes per song if you can, because you may be sat there for 4 hours. Now, one of the distinctive features of cocktail piano is that it tends to use a very wide span of the keyboard, and in particular it tends to go quite high a lot of the time. If you listen to a lot of cocktail piano, you'll hear a lot of quite high, quite tinkly melodies, okay? There's a reason for that. Again, if you're playing in a noisy environment, you want to cut through the background conversation, and you don't want to do that just by bashing and making loads of noise all the time. So what you do is you travel up into the higher octaves of the piano keyboard and use the higher frequencies that these notes up here produce to get through the background noise. Now, little runs are great ways of doing that, and there are various ways you can do them. The simplest thing you can do is just to take a chord shape and move it up the octaves, okay? Here's our E flat major 7 chord. I'm just going to go up. Next chord. I realise I'm going to be going out of shot here, but that's cocktail for you. Just playing the same chord all the way up, and a nice rich octave bass note, yeah, down there, just to give us a full sound at the bottom. You can begin to vary that. You can play different shapes in each octave as you go up. And all in all, it's a really kind of easy, really kind of chilled out way of using the whole keyboard. Moving on from there, you can begin to introduce little arpeggio runs, okay, which are a little bit more tricky, but not quite as tricky as they look often. Typically what I'm doing there is just taking a chord like F minor 7 and going and jumping, so running through it like that, maybe a couple of times, which looks kind of impressive, but if you practice it a little bit, it's not that hard, especially if you stick things together with the sustain pedal. The trick is not to get too obsessed with technique. It's good to be confident and have lightness of touch, but don't worry if it's a bit sort of splashy and uneven. Yeah, just relax into it. Practice those movements, but don't imagine that you're approaching it as if it's Beethoven or something. Yeah, you can be much more chilled out, and it looks kind of impressive without being super difficult. While we're playing around with these chord shapes in the right, another thing that you can do is just use them to improvise with, yeah, and move away from the melody completely. Okay, so there was a little bit of melodic shaping going on there, but all I was really doing was playing chords in the right hand in different inversions, and mainly kind of choosing inversions that kind of interlock with each other. So that C minor 7 shape there is very close to that F minor 7 shape, so there was a little bit of jumping, but there was also choosing these inversions of the chords which lock together quite neatly and quite smoothly. You'll also see that I'm beginning to enrich those chords a little bit more, okay? So the C minor 7 chord becomes C minor 9 there, okay? F minor 7 can become F minor 9 and even F minor 11, yeah, and there was also quite a bit of richer substitution going on. So I think when I played that, the F minor 7 over B flat, what I did a couple of times was play something like F minor 9 over B flat, and I flattened the fifth of the underlying F minor chord, C to C flat, to give it that lovely kind of minor sound. We get that nice discord between the right and the left hands. Okay, kind of bluesy and rich, and a lovely resolve back to the tonic, yeah? Now, mostly what I'm doing there isn't planned as such, although clearly I'm using my experience, I'm using knowledge of chords, I'm using my ear to know what will sound good. What I'm not doing is saying, aha, right, I will now play F minor 9 in the second inversion or whatever. Instead, I'm letting the chords fall under my fingers, and even doing something that I've mentioned in tutorials in the past, which is doing more by doing less. So that C minor 9 chord I've got there, yeah, is achieved by holding on to the notes of the E flat major 7 in the previous bar, and then just sticking a C in the bass. So E flat major 7, C minor 9, and do you see how I've created that richer chord there, richer than the C minor 7, actually by doing less. So much of this comes down to knowing which notes are available to you. So in other words, knowing your scales, so you have kind of an instinctive feel for the particular notes in any key to the point where they just fall under your fingers, and just playing around and be willing to be kind of inventive with your chords, yeah? Finally, you can kind of mix and match up your chord-based improvisation with more general melodic improvisation. Now, improvising melody is a big subject, yeah, I can't go into it in detail here, but I've got lots of other material on it. In particular, check out my series of YouTube videos on jazz piano for complete beginners, which covers all the kind of improvising melody using scales, using your ear, that kind of thing. I'll stick a link to the playlist in the description field below this video. Broadly speaking, improvised melody in cocktail should be fairly gentle, and you don't want to use too many chord tones that are too way out, yeah, not too much from the blues scale, a little bit, yeah, and maybe some stuff like, flat ninths and flat sixths, but not too much of that kind of thing. This isn't kind of hard blues or bebop. Keep it relatively simple, relatively clean, close to the major and pentatonic scales if you can. Once again, cocktail is actually a really, really good genre for practicing this kind of melodic improvisation, because you do have so much freedom and there isn't the pressure of a strict tempo forcing you forward. Just a couple of things it's worth saying. You'll notice I was back to playing chord shapes in the left hand there, yeah? Remember not to play too many big chunky chords too far down. As I started to get lower, I was going for shell chords instead. Okay, so that's my F minor 7. I think I probably used there, and I think I probably used that instead of a B flat 7 chord. Okay, again, it's about making sure we've got the character of the chord, but nice big spaces between those bass notes, so we're not getting too many overtones, we're not getting too muddy a sound. I notice also how I was focusing high on the keyboard for the start of that melody there. Again, it's about cutting through. It's about imagining we're playing in that kind of, you know, that lounge bar environment, and we want to just gently make ourselves heard over that background noise. By the way, if you want to learn the whole of Blue Moon, go and have a listen to it online or wherever and see if you can figure out how the middle 8 works, the middle section. There's a whole run of quite interesting chords in there, and I'll give you a head start just by playing through them now. Imagine we're working on the song in the key of E flat, as we have been doing. First chord of the middle section is A flat 6, then it goes to B flat 7 with an added 6th, the G, and back to E flat major 7, and then that repeats, A flat 6 to B flat 7 with an added 6, then to E flat major 7. Then things go a bit crazy because we have A flat minor 6, D flat, G flat, okay, and then we need to work our way, the progression works its way back to E flat, the main key, by going to F minor 7, and then you might find it written, if you look at the chords, as B flat 7, but the actual chord in the song is F minor 7 over B flat. Okay, and that takes us back to the main verse. Yeah, have a play around with those, have a listen to it online, practice using your ear, really important skill, picking stuff up by ear, and see how you get on. Okay, so that's it for another tutorial. I hope you liked it. If you found it useful, do check out the other stuff on my channel. I've got loads of tutorials on cocktail, on jazz, on blues, on pop, on rock, all kinds of different styles, playlists for all of them, and subscribe to my channel to get the regular updates. Don't forget, as I said, my books, How to Really Play the Piano and an Introduction to Cocktail Piano. Loads of people seem to really like them. I get really good feedback on those things. Also, follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I'll put the links in the description field below. Finally, I also have a crowdfunding campaign on patreon.com at www.patreon.com/Bill Hilton. So if you can spare $2 or $3 a month just to support what I'm doing there, this is my main business, this is what I do for a living these days, believe it or not, then that would be really appreciated. Comments, questions, all of that kind of stuff, all welcome. I always try to reply. Sometimes it takes me a few days, but I always try to get back to people. There we go. I will see you next time.